Coming up on Nebraska Stories, delivering catharsis through poetry. Craft brewing in Robbers Cave. Tracking the tiny critters of the sandhills. Two Germans from Russia serve love on a warm plate. And a look back on the deadly blizzard of 1949.
It's very simple. All you have to do is pick a topic and I'll write you a poem about that. People are kind of baffled that it's that simple, that there also isn't a price to it. I started doing this because I wanted to be a poet. It's definitely an exercise in patience. There have been days where I've had to wait like 5 hours for people to come up, and other days where I have too many people coming up and I can't keep up with it. I'm using a 1904 Corona typewriter, folding typewriter. It's the Corona 3. It was made for World War I, taking it out into the battlefield and writing about the war. And I've always loved just the feel of writing on a typewriter. It gives me time to think and time to reflect about what I'm writing, and it's a very contemplative practice. It seems like it has a personality and it's temperamental, and I don't blame it because it's so old. There's a forcefulness to the keys when you press them down, so it's almost as if it's more permanent what you're writing because you're producing something on a piece of paper.
Mommy, what does it say?
Well, let's read
You're getting the reward of writing right away.
Want to read it one more time? Okay, it says, Phoenix, wings that shine all the colors known to the eyes. Your wings lose their luster, and you travel to a home away from home to shed your ashes and claim new light. You master the flames, let them embrace you from the fire. A work of art is born, ready to return to the breath of the sun. By Brittany Cordera.
It was good seeing you guys. Have a good day.
My kids said that they would remember the day forever.
Parents with their kids will come up and they'll be like, do you know what that is? And then they become, immediately enamored by it. Some kids will know what it is right away, and some others can't really put two and two together that this, the computer evolved from this machine right here.
I've seen a typewriter before, but it's kind of fascinating to see an old piece of machinery and now in the time that we're at, before all these new computers were made.
Do you want to try it?
Sure.
Cool.
So
Here, let me give you a blank line, okay? There's a quote by Soren Kierkegaard that says, life can only be experienced backwards, but must be lived forward. And I feel like poets, and every artist in their own way, is trying to take life as experienced backwards and make it permanent and put it on paper or paint it on a canvas or write it in the symphony.
That was perfect.
And that's why poetry is important, because people get snapshots of things that they missed while they were living life forward instead of backwards.
Yeah, she crochets.
Okay.
I have an 88-year-old mother. There's not a lot I can buy for her these days. Well, granddaughters have never seen a typewriter in action, ever. They were awed at it. Gave her bullet points about her age. She's a mom, grandmother, great-grandmother, grew up on a farm, likes to do this, likes flowers, you know, just gave her a little bit of information. Dear Doris, like stars, your threads of light piece together a tapestry of family. Immortalized in the night sky, a love that is unbreakable. Your gardens of violet pansies are a gift from God. Each flower is a member of your golden family. The farm life treated you well, taught you true beauty, and strengthened heart. Forever remain the brightest flame that overcomes the darkest days. Oh my God, it's making me cry. That is beautiful. It touched my heart, and I know my mom. She probably won't even be able to read the whole thing. I'll probably have to read it for her.
Poetry is a catharsis in itself, and so if I can pay it forward by providing people with catharsis by writing them poetry, then that's a big, you know, gift. That's definitely, it's really nice to do that and awesome. And there's no words, honestly. There's no words to describe the feelings and the emotions.
I think she's gonna love it.
I'm trying to help people realize that poetry can be used for these things. It can be used to bridge memories. Good. We are trying to capture moments and experiences. And a lot of people are daunted by poetry because they think it's more than that. But it's not. It's very simple. You're writing the life you're living. You're capturing every moment that is important.
Robbers Cave has its own folklore here in Lincoln and in Nebraska.
And it's changed hands a couple of times, and different people have tried different things, but we're the first one to resurrect the brewery aspect of it. That was one of the things that made this property attractive to us as brewery owners, was resurrecting one of those old uses of what the cave used to be in beer production.
Easy drinker.
Resurrecting Robbers Cave in Lincoln seemed a task perfectly fit for a brewery who models its brand after a police shield.
Blue Blood itself, in theory, started back when I became a police officer back in January 2000. And I was an officer for 6 years in Lincoln. I got hurt and had to retire. And after working for the state for a while, I started drinking a lot more. And I thought, okay, great, I'm gonna start home brewing because that would be a great way to make my own beer, drink my own beer, save some money that way. But once I started brewing, I loved it. I loved every little bit about it. The creativity you can put into a beer, the ingredients, just everything was a lot of fun about it. And so I knew I wanted to do something. I wanted to get away from the government. And so decided that Blue Blood Brewing was the best option for me. It was daunting, proving to people that the concept could work, and especially even on paper. At that point in time, Lincoln hadn't had a new brewery in eons.
As Blue Blood continued to grow, the opportunity of playing with a Cops and Robbers theme was too good to pass up.
First of all, like any idea that I've had regarding this, we were drinking one night. And we knew we wanted to reach the public more directly and having a better location to do so. As I was searching for spots in Lincoln, Robbers Cave kept popping up over and over again.
The cave's history in Lincoln stretches back centuries. The Pawnee Indians, who were native to the area, were the first to use the cave.
Then Pioneer Brewing Company started in this area as well and started using the cave for purposes of beer production. Back then, in the late 1800s, when you produced beer, it's before we had nice stainless steel equipment, right? So what beer producers needed then was a place that had a couple of things. One is consistent temperature, which is something you get with a cave. Absence of light, which is another thing you get with the cave, and lots of space. And so those three things really made the cave attractive to the early beer makers. Robbers Cave gets its name from Jesse James. So the legend is that Jesse James and his gang, after they robbed the bank, got away with millions of dollars, they came to Lincoln to get help from his brother and his brother's friends, and they hid out down here.
Once into the cave, though, the team at Blue Blood found that they weren't the only ones going to be using the cave.
When we first kind of popped open the cave, right, so all we had were flashlights and cell phone lights and some lanterns, and it was cold, but there were hundreds of bats just kind of flying all over. We had disturbed them by being in there, and so we had an interest in preserving that.
Let's find out how we can keep the bats in a certain area, deal with the bats, and also work with Game and Parks to possibly create this space where the bats can come all the time. So we created the third tunnel that is back there. We actually created a space for the bats. To bring this back to life was one thing, but the other fact is it was a brewery, is why it exists really to this extent in the first place.
This expansion into the cave wouldn't be possible without the growth of craft beer in Nebraska. The state has seen an increase in local breweries in the last several years.
Craft beer's surge, I personally believe is one, people want a better tasting product, and two, it's about local. You've got to have that local touch on a lot of things, and really that's shown it. Look at farmers markets, they're busier than they ever have been. There's more of them than there ever have been. People want to know where their stuff's coming from and who makes it.
That includes using locally grown hops.
Hops are very difficult on the labor side to grow. They grow very well. Our soil is excellent for it. The university is now doing studies across the state and determining the best areas. The Nebraska Hop Growers Association wanted to get more growers active and work with each other to try to process and make sure that quality hops are being grown in Nebraska. A hop is actually, it looks like a loose leaf cone. Inside there is yellow lupulin glands, and that's actually the bitterness and some of the flavor and aroma that the brewers are looking for their craft beer. There's so many craft breweries starting across the United States and within Nebraska, and they're needing more local products. And as we've proved through the Nebraska Hop Growers Association, the other members, that quality hops can be grown here in the state. It really adds to those local beers, and they can get in those local flavors within those beers. So it's an exciting time for both sides.
It's not just Lincoln and Omaha. The craft beer industry in our state is grown. Certainly in the urban areas, but it's growing across the state. Some of those breweries are in some of the smallest rural communities in our state, and they are doing very well.
I think if anybody who wants to drink craft beer or wants to be part of it, they have to walk in with an open mind. If they walk in saying, I don't drink dark beer, well, what does that mean? And so if you come in with that open mind, you're going to find stuff that you never thought you would like and possibly love it. So it's just going in with that open mind and really talking to the bartenders and stuff at the tap rooms, because they're going to be the ones that help guide that individual to the right spot and to the right beer.
Drinking beer is, in that regard, has turned from just something that you do while you're watching a sport or working in your garage or at dinner into an event where you're really trying to understand the styles of beer and understand the different nuances, and most beer drinkers will tell you that that's what draws them to craft beer. It has nothing to do with alcohol or anything like that. It's that social experience, and that's what we try to provide, down in this space, which is just a unique experience where you can have a craft beer and explore that.
Dr. Keith Geluso is researching the many animals that inhabit blowouts or sandy areas in the Nebraska Sandhills.
You might pick out certain areas like this to seek out to find your biodiversity of insects or small mammals or snakes or the lizard that we just found out here. Oh, there's a little velvet ant.
At a young age, Keith's father, who is also a field biologist, encouraged him to have an appreciation for animals and the environment.
What is this? We have got a mole run. Their scientific name is Scalopus aquaticus, and so you think with aquaticus that they swim. They don't swim in water, but they swim in sand. To prove to yourself that there was something through here, I'm going to put my hand, and all of a sudden it's going to break into there it is, and I can feel a hole, a tunnel going all the way through there.
He is currently working on a research project to map biological diversity on the Schweitzer Ranch in the Nebraska Sandhills.
My hand is not leaking water, but this is a defense mechanism of a little critter that I found. This is a woodhouse toad. Oh my gosh, this thing is almost white.
Blowouts provide habitat for a large number of species.
Species have edges, and there's reasons why they have edges, and so it's going to end when they hit the end of the sandhills or the sandhills that get too much rain, and so there won't be enough open sand for the adaptations for them to best survive. Look at that big tail. We'll take
As a vertebrate ecologist, Keith spends a lot of time outside studying the distribution and number of species in an ecosystem.
I wouldn't be necessarily going down the middle unless I was looking for insects or tiger beetles, but I'm going to be on the edge where there's some cover. I am absolutely a kid in a candy store. There's a prairie lizard running along the edge. Kangaroo rat hole. There's another one. There's another one. Here's a little cutting. Oh yeah, that's been clipped off by a rodent. Here's where the kangaroo rat might be going in one way. Here's an out hole where he shoots and the animal doesn't even see he's coming out the other side. And so we can see with nice sand the story unfold right in front of us. There's where they're feeding.
There are a variety of habitats in the Nebraska Sandhills. Here along Gracie Creek, they are setting live traps.
They walk in there, they step on the back, and the door closes. There's some species you can just reach in there and grab them and they're not going to bite you. Other ones I wouldn't do that forever because they'll chew your little finger off.
As a biology professor, Keith encourages his students to develop a sense of wonder and curiosity about the natural world.
It's a runway of animals down here. We're going to have quite a few voles tomorrow.
Keith often continues his research late into the evening. Many mammals, like the kangaroo rat, are nocturnal species. They sleep during the day and forage at night to avoid being easily spotted by predators. In the morning, Keith checks the traps and records information about the species that make their home along the creek.
The door here. Meadow vole, Microtus pennsylvanicus. There's a lot more data we can take on these weights, and I just take down usually the sex and the age. Follow your passions. If you have an interest in science and getting out there, if you're interested and have a passion for it, go for it. There's just unbelievable paths you can take to become somebody who cares about the environment.
There are cooks, and then there are the Cookhausens.
We like to cook. That's one of our things.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of fun with it. We get hollered back and forth and all that, and, but we have a lot of fun.
On any given day, you'll find Dick and Marlene Cookhausen in their kitchen, enjoying time together, cooking.
She makes the best pot roast. Her pot roasts are better than my mom's.
The Scottsbluff couple actually found each other over food when Dick made a spontaneous stop for coffee, a stop that would turn out to be a second chance at love.
I went down to Baird, where my first wife's grave was, for Memorial Day, and put flowers on her grave and spent some time down there. And she was working at Jack and Jill, and she was standing out in front of the store, and I knew that Dean had died, so I stopped and talked to her.
It was very comfortable. It was just like we talked to each other the day before, but yet we hadn't talked to each other for, quite some time. So it was just very easy, very like best friends.
Best friends who discovered they not only shared an interest in culinary arts, but a common heritage.
Since I married Dick, I've learned more about the German from Russian tradition and more about the food.
I'm proud to be a German from Russia.
Germans from Russia is a unique, albeit confusing term for a group of Germans who, at the invitation of Russian Empress Catherine the Great, colonized along the Volga River in Russia in the mid-1700s. For 200 years, the colonists maintained their German culture and traditions. Later on, when the members immigrated to the United States, they became known as Germans from Russia. In the early 1900s, Nebraska became home to many Germans from Russia, including Dick and Marlene's ancestors. Today, one of the favorite ways the Cookhousens celebrate their heritage is through food.
This Schnitzsup, I just generally knew what was. I looked at some of the recipes and talked to a few people, but after I made it the first time, now this is my recipe.
Schnitzsup is made with assorted dried fruit that is gently boiled until reconstituted, and then finished with cream.
You want to cook that and bring it to a boil, and you slow it down. You try to keep it from sticking to the bottom of the pan. When you reach in there and you stick something in, it just folds over and it's getting soft and everything. And you can tell by the taste too. It's got that fruit taste, but then it's kind of diluted in that. And the more you cook it, the more concentrated that gets. You got to temper your cream a little bit, and that's what I do. And let it cool down and then stir it in. Because one of the first times I made that, I dumped that in there and I curdled all that cream, and then it was chunks going. It's terrible.
One of Marlene's favorite foods is a potato and dumpling dish. It's fried and contains a mix of bacon, hard-boiled potatoes, onions, and dumplings.
We like the dumplings, and they aren't made too much like biscuits.
German dumplings use few ingredients and are usually steamed or boiled.
This is a dumpling I learned from my mother-in-law. Potatoes, the dumplings, the onions. Only when it was all done, they poured cream over it. Then I learned about the fried place in the dough. And we decided that we liked the fried better than we liked the one with the cream or the milk.
You know, when you sit down and you've had like a Dover and glaze, somebody put some time in that. It wasn't just, somebody didn't rip a deal off and throw it in the microwave. There was somebody put their heart and their soul in that so that you would have a nice meal.
Love, delivered on a hot plate. Actually, it was a love that was put on the back burner years ago when Dick and Marlene were in high school.
It was kind of an off and on. He had girlfriends, I had other boyfriends, and going steady, and then you'd break up, and then you'd go together. And
if things had worked different, I'd have probably married her when by the time I was out of high school shortly, but that didn't happen.
They married other people, raised their children, and then they both became widowed. A lifetime of memories, with room for new ones.
He called me and asked me if I would like to go on a date. And I said, I didn't know for sure. You know, I didn't know whether I was ready because I had lost my first husband and it hadn't been too long ago.
A year later, we were married, so that was just one of those things.
We love to cook together. We're just two happy Germans from Russia.
Two people in love who love to cook together. What's not to love about that?
At a time when ranchers were debating next year's breed lines and seeking the calf who would feed out to 1,000 pounds by Labor Day, Mother Nature delivered a knockout punch. A killer storm that would last for months wiped out most of the optimistic speculation about what kind of cattle anybody would have in the spring. On January 2nd, 1949, a full-scale blizzard hit the upper Great Plains.
There ain't nothing to put the chills up your back like a bad, bad snowstorm. Nothing.
Some snowdrifts reached 50 feet. Ranches, farms, and entire towns were snowed in and stranded.
It was one bad dude. That's all I can say, and we've never seen one that even compares to it since then. And lack of water killed a lot of livestock, even if the world was full of snow. It kind of slid into the people. Wasn't Crawford partying, you know, and instead of going home like I should have, I partied too long and I didn't get home for a while.
Probably the next day or two, we tried to get out, and from then on, all it was try to save cattle, save their lives.
I remember the rivers were frozen pretty thick, and I remember chopping quite a little ice, and if you got cold, it's because you weren't chopping fast enough.
And there hadn't been a train for a week because the snow was so deep they couldn't get through. Over here on the tracks is about 10 or 12 steers set. They wouldn't leave there because they step off into that deep snow. They're scared, so they were froze right there. We couldn't believe it. I hear a train coming. I'm sitting right there and saw him hit those steers. And that snowplow, of course, the steers just went like that. And they're big 900-pound animals. We stop right there. The train's gone through, and we ride over there, and they're mangled. And I said, Pistol, we got to cut their throat. You can't leave them like this. Get your knife out. And I'm cutting the throat on the steer, you know. I don't want him to suffer. Pistol's over there with his knife, and the tears are coming down. And he's kind of halfway working, doing what he... I said, damn it, get with it now. We got to get this done. But that's the kind of a tough guy he was, but so soft inside.
In the vernacular of war in the post-war era, Operation Snowbound cleared 34,000 miles of roads, and Operation Haylift dropped tons of hay to starving animals.
The blizzard of '49 occurred right on the cusp of the economic explosion that followed World War II, the unbelievable leap in beef prices and the demand for the high-quality beef that was being produced in Nebraska. The tragedy was not just the loss of livestock, but it was also just devastating to ranchers who lost cattle at a time when they were going to be able to pick the market up as it went stellar.
When I even talk about some of them, it still makes chills run up my back. It really does.
To see more Nebraska Stories, go to our website and like us on Facebook. Nebraska Stories is funded by the Margaret and Martha Thomas Foundation. Sustained funding for arts coverage on Nebraska Stories is provided by the H. Lee and Carol Gendler Charitable Fund.